This is Richard Gilbert reading a short excerpt from Why I Hate My Dog about our rescue dog Belle, which is available on Longreads.com. Belle is out back, asking to come inside. Since I hate a barking dog, I shelve my work and march to the door, knowing she'll run as soon as she sees me. Sure enough, when she glimpses me through the glass slider, she wheels and flees across the lawn. She had taken time from her busy schedule to make sure I hadn't left, was still available to her, and, having interrupted me, returns to her batty pursuits. Shithead, I mutter, closing the door. Yet in the wee hours of this morning, at the ungodly stroke of 2 o'clock, she again performed her lone, great, silent service, keeping me company. I'd come wide awake, twitchy with vague anxieties, which soon attached to recent fears and old regrets. When my feet hit the floor, Belle stood in her warm bed beside ours. She trotted downstairs with me. In the light of day, I can take for granted Belle's shadowing me from room to room. Her steady presence seems simply to reflect her own separation anxiety, and I can ignore or mock her. At night, stranded in darkness, I can't. So I had felt grateful to Belle. I'd worried briefly that she would abandon me and return to her cozy nest. She didn't. She never does. Now, watching her streak toward the end of our property, I enjoy marveling at her idiocy. She barks straight ahead at nothing, sometimes jerking her head upward to yelp at the tops of passing trees, and sometimes throwing her head sideways, almost over a shoulder, to strafe the border fences. To see her leave after summoning me used to fill me with rage. I'm used to it, though sometimes my ears get hot. Sure, I write memoirs to remember and to discover. In the case of this essay about my dog, which I just reread, I had forgotten some things that the essay brought back, and I'm not sure that I would remember them now if I had never written them down and explored them and their meaning. And then the second reason, which is even bigger, is to discover meaning and to make connections. And the example that I read about getting up in the night and having this dog get up with me was an amazing discovery that it just, for me, it was so important because I hadn't planned on writing that. You can't think of everything in advance you're going to write about in a long essay. I started out just telling them the story of this rescue dog and how crazy she was, and then weaving in the story of our dog we had just lost and kind of comparing and contrasting those two. But it was only because I was working on that essay that it really struck home to me when it actually happened, that this one night I got up and Belle got up with me and went downstairs with me and kept me company. And I realized that she always does that. And moreover, I realized that I valued that it was so important to me to have that company, and it was such a comfort, and that I was always a little bit worried that Belle would get bored and go back upstairs and go to bed in her cozy bed and leave me alone in the dark with my sleeplessness and my own anxiety. And so those kind of discoveries of meaning are very rich, and they're the biggest reward for writing memoir for me. Yes. So this is about a rescue dog who had a huge separation anxiety problem from being taken to a pound and just left there by the family, the young couple who had raised her. As soon as they had a child, they didn't want or couldn't care for this dog anymore. I think she drove them crazy because of the way that they had raised her as a puppy. And so on its surface level, it's about that huge problem that she had and learning to live with her. On a deeper level, it's about the emotional bond between humans and dogs, and about the emotional similarities between dogs and people. We co-evolved, and they very much have qualities that we admire and need. And so as I worked on the essay, it became clear to me that it was more than about just the craziness of this dog. As I say in the essay, it became clear to me that Belle was paying the price for the gifts of her species. Yes, it was actually my wife's idea. I had published a book a few years before, a memoir called Shepherd, a Memoir, about our adventures in farming. And I was writing some essays, and I was writing about family, writing about my parents. And my wife said, you know, I think you ought to write about something kind of fun and funny. I think you should write about animals. I think you should write about our dogs. I think you should write an essay about Belle. And so I thought, well, I'll try that. That's a good idea. So I started simply writing the story of getting this dog. We had had a beloved dog die, a dog we were very close to, a dog we'd had for 13 years. And my wife and I were empty nesters. We were living in this house that was owned by the university, kind of rattling around in it. And my wife and our adult daughter, who would come on visits, didn't think I was doing very well without a dog. I was spending too much time working and sitting around. And so I began to write this story of getting this dog, but also to weave in the story of the previous dog. And so the loss of that recent dog was very fresh. And he was very different in some ways. But that is what we got this dog Belle, when she was 6. So she was not a young dog. She was middle-aged. So we had her for several years, and we were looking ahead and thinking, you know, this dog is going to not last forever. And just having buried this previous dog, that was still raw. So exploring those two dogs kind of was an interesting thing for me, and how to write about one and then write about the other was something that really occupied me in trying to get a draft of this essay. This essay was fairly fast to write, probably about a month. Quite a contrast to my book. I rewrote my memoir over and over again and worked on it effectively for 10 years. But with this essay, I got a draft within a couple of weeks. And then that key insight I mentioned at the beginning, for me, to realize this insight was a great gift about my getting up in the night. When I started just writing this essay about this dog and how crazy she was and how we got her and how this contrasted with our previous dog, something that emotional was not in my conscious mind. But as I worked on the essay, it took about 2-3 weeks in when I basically had a draft, and then boom, I think what happened was actually one night I actually woke up and that very incident happened where I got up and Belle got up with me. And then I realized, oh, that needs to go in the essay. So that was probably a good 3 weeks in. And then I worked on it for another month. And I would say then in the editing process, when it was accepted really fast by Longreads, and probably there were a couple of weeks going back and forth with the editors, so maybe 6 weeks all told. So fairly fast, and but a lot of time just focused on that particular essay in that amount of time, and then setting it aside a little bit, and then coming back to it, and working in the things about animals and humans, especially dogs, co-evolving with people. That took a little time to work into the essay and decide where to put that kind of material, and also how not to go too much on that type of material, because the people who were reading this, I thought, would want a humorous, it's kind of presented as a humorous essay with the title, Why I Hate My Dog. Now, you know, that sounds like, well, this is going to be a little bit tongue-in-cheek, perhaps. So it took me a while to weave some of the more, serious content type things in, and then to pull back and not have too much on that. A tip that I would give to people writing memoir essays or even books, any personal nonfiction, would be, once you have a draft of something, pick a writer, or ideally 3 writers, whom you admire and like for different reasons. Say you love Annie Dillard's astringency in her writing, and you love Virginia Woolf's reflection. You love James Baldwin's sentences and the colloquial snap of his prose. Read your piece, ideally aloud, and then immediately pick up an essay or a chapter by one of these authors you've picked, and read theirs, and you will immediately see all kinds of things that you would want to change. But read this essay you want to emulate, and then immediately read yours, and you will see things that you can improve about yours in light of the sentences or the reflection, whatever quality you admire. Now, for this essay, Why I Hate My Dog, this was intended to be a humorous essay, as well as one with some seriousness to it and some profundity about relationships and human nature and animal nature. But I wanted to make it kind of funny because this dog was funny. She drove me crazy. We laughed about her. And so I read some David Sedaris, and he is a very funny memoir writer, essayist too. And I read him and tried to emulate what he was doing in his work. And it's such things like with David Sedaris, it's the way he understates things, the way he uses sentence rhythms, and sort of his wry outlook and his unapologetic nature about himself, and kind of lays a lot out there. And so I would say that this is an extremely helpful technique that I've found to improve my own writing. Take one writer, take 3 writers, read something by them you love, and then read your piece, and things will jump out at you. Things about sentence structure, things about content and tone. You'll be amazed. I think an exemplary memoir piece is James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son. And in fact, I think I would call it America's greatest essay. Now, it's the title essay in his book, Notes of a Native Son. And you can, that's a wonderful collection, and you can probably also find Notes of a Native Son online, the title essay itself online. And also it appeared first in 1955 in Harper's under the title Me and My House. And the reason that I find it such an exemplary essay is because James Baldwin is such an exemplary writer. He writes such beautiful sentences, very elegant, but also there's a colloquial quality that he brings that's beautiful. His subject matter is very profound. It is about having a stepfather who was scarred by racism and growing up with him and not wanting to become like him and to vow that you never would. And then James Baldwin has his own scarring experiences with racism, which he portrays and talks about. And he's left feeling, I don't want to become a bitter man, a broken man like my father, but how do I live with this? And race is still America's great subject, maybe always will be. And Baldwin wrote about it so beautifully. Another book of his I would recommend is The Devil Finds Work, which is a collection of essays about watching American movies, and especially about watching American movies while black. That is far ahead of his time. He wrote about the racism that's baked into so many movies. And he has a memorable line about how, as a kid, he used to root for the cowboys against the Indians, and then suddenly realized, wait a minute, I'm rooting against myself. I'm an Indian. So anything by James Baldwin is great. Notes of a Native Son is a beautiful and powerful and very important essay. And The Devil Finds Work is another very great collection. And of course, he wrote and published many other things. But those in particular, I would say, are exemplary. I would like to give a shout out to Brevity Magazine. You can look at Brevity online, and they are wonderful 750 words or less memoirs. It has been edited since its inception by Dinty Moore, and they are amazing, beautiful short pieces that are funny and moving, and go to Brevity and read them.